It started with an email. No subject line. No sender name. Just a single sentence in the body. They're preparing again. Harvest Moon. Gallows End. 3 days. At first, Julia Wells thought it was spam or some cryptic invite to a cult blog. But after clicking on the attached photo, an overhead shot of a town square with a massive oak tree encircled by carved stones, something inside her shifted. A flicker of something she hadn't felt in months. Curiosity. Julia had been drifting ever since her brother, Michael, died. Cancer. Quick and cruel. After the funeral, she'd buried herself in work, chasing down obscure traditions, forgotten towns, pagan myths, anything that felt like it came from a world outside her own. And Gallows End? It didn't exist on Google Maps. That alone was enough to make her pack a bag. The drive was long and silent. Endless stretches of pine trees, crumbling asphalt, and a growing sense that she was moving backward in time. No cell signal. No traffic. Only a sign nailed to a leaning post. Welcome to Gallows End, EST 1791. As she passed beneath it, her phone went black. The town was impossibly quaint. Stone cottages, flickering lanterns, flower boxes on every window. People on porches raised their hands in slow, almost rehearsed waves as she drove by. Julia pulled up near the center square, parking in front of an old general store. That's when she saw the tree, the same one from the photo, thick and gnarled, with ropes of moss hanging like funeral veils. Around its base, 12 circular stones, each with strange symbols etched deep into their faces. Something about the place felt off. Too quiet, too clean, too staged. A man in a vest and wide smile approached as she stepped out of the car. "You must be Miss Wells," he said, voice warm, too warm. "We've been expecting you." Julia's blood chilled. "How did you—" "We read your articles," he cut in smoothly, "about forgotten traditions. You're just in time for our once-in-a-generation celebration." "Harvest Moon?" she asked, testing. He smiled wider. "You know about it, then." "Most folks don't." Julia forced a smile, her instinct already whispering that something was wrong. But she'd come too far to turn back now. She checked into the only inn in town, a creaking, candlelit place run by a woman named Agnes who never blinked enough. That night, as she lay in bed, she heard singing from outside, a low, melodic hum that made the window panes vibrate. She peeked through the curtains. A group of townsfolk stood around the tree, holding hands. Eyes closed, the moon above them burned a dull orange. Julia stepped back, heart thudding. Something told her this wasn't just a festival. It was a ritual. The next morning, sunlight streamed to the curtains like nothing had happened. Julia almost convinced herself it was a dream. The humming, the people in the square, the eerie orange moon. But when she walked downstairs, the inn was empty. No Agnes. No sound. A porcelain teacup sat on the table with a note beneath it. "She'll find you today. Be ready to listen." Julia spent the morning exploring the town with her camera, but something was off in every frame. The images came out too dark, the angles distorted, like the lens was catching more than what was visible. Locals greeted her warmly, but their eyes never lingered on her face. It was as if they were looking through her. Around noon, she wandered into the town library, a dusty building that smelled like old paper and lavender. Behind the counter sat an elderly woman with silver hair coiled like a crown, her hands folded over a thick, leather-bound book. She looked up as Julia approached and said, "You shouldn't have come, child, but you're here now, and that means it's time." "I'm Julia," she replied hesitantly. "You must be Elsie. I was waiting for you." She slid the book across the counter. This belonged to the last one who came. 20 years ago. Julia opened it slowly. Yellowed pages, cracked leather. It was a journal, filled with frantic handwriting, rough sketches of the same tree, and cryptic passages about the harvest moon. The pact feeds the land. Blood for Bloom. One for all. They don't kill. They give. The offering ground breathes beneath our feet. "This is insane," Julia whispered, flipping through a drawing of 12 figures in white robes, standing in a circle. "What is this? Some sort of cult?" It's older than any cult, Elsie said softly. This town should have died 100 times over. Disease, fire, drought. But it didn't. Every 20 years, Gallows End gives a gift to something ancient, something buried. She tapped the final page of the journal, where a single sentence was scrawled in red ink. Do not let them smile at you. That's how they choose. Julia stared at it, heart quickening. Why are you telling me this? Because I was here last time. I watched the girl disappear, and I see the way they look at you. The air in the library grew colder. A gust of wind rattled the windows. Julia closed the journal and hugged it to her chest. They say the harvest moon blooms for the one who's been chosen, Elsie whispered. And last night, it glowed brighter than I've ever seen. Outside, the sun dimmed behind a passing cloud. The streets fell silent, and far in the distance, from the direction of the oak tree, a hum began again, soft and low, like the throat of the earth itself had started to sing. Julia left the library with the journal pressed tightly against her chest, her fingers trembling as if the ink inside had bled into her skin. The hum had stopped, but its residue clung to the air, like the last note of a funeral song still echoing. She tried to call someone, anyone, but her phone remained useless. The screen flickering like a dying heartbeat. Panic itched beneath her skin. She needed answers, real ones, the kind only her mother could give. Back at the inn, Agnes was once again behind the front desk, humming the same strange tune Julia had heard in the square. The woman's eyes followed her as she climbed the stairs. No words, just that smile, stretched too tight, too patient. Julia slammed her door shut behind her. She turned on her recorder, whispered a quick memo, then pulled out her laptop. No Wi-Fi. She didn't care. She scrolled through old photos she'd scanned years ago. Family portraits, childhood vacations, searching for something familiar, anything to connect her mother to this place. And then, buried deep in forgotten folder, she found it, an old Polaroid labeled Autumn 05. In the corner, behind a group of smiling strangers, was her mother, younger, hair darker, but unmistakable. Standing near a stone circle, her expression frozen between fear and regret. Julia zoomed in. Her mother was looking at the tree. Hands trembling, she dialed a number. The phone rang once, twice. Then her mother answered. Julia, are you okay? Were you in Gallows End? She asked, voice shaking. Silence. I found photo. You were there. In 2005. More silence, and then a breath, sharp and broken. You weren't supposed to find that place. What is this town, Mom? What did you do? I didn't do anything, her mother said quickly, too quickly. I left. I ran. Why? What were you running from? They wanted me. I was the offering that year. Her voice cracked. I was pregnant, Julia. With you. I left before the moon rose. Julia sat on the edge of bed, the walls around her closing in. You mean this isn't random? She whispered. No, baby. Her mother was crying now. You were born under the curse. That town, it never forgets. I hoped if I stayed away, you'd be safe. But I was wrong. The moon's calling you back. You don't understand what they believe. The call cut off. Not ended. Cut. Dead static hiss from the phone speaker, followed by a low, guttural sound, like something breathing on the other end. Julia dropped the phone. The journal on her lap flipped open, pages fluttering until they stopped on a crude drawing. A woman surrounded by townsfolk, her face twisted in terror. And above her, the harvest moon, massive and red, watching like a god with no mercy. The caption read, "The one who escapes will always return." And outside her window, the moon had already begun to rise again. Julia didn't sleep. She sat in the dark, staring at the moon through the warped glass of her window, its orange glow pulsing like a living wound in the sky. She kept replaying her mother's voice in her head. You were born under the curse. Everything made sense now, in the worst possible way. The invitation, the smiles, the timing. She wasn't just a guest. She was the offering. At dawn, she packed her bag, slammed her journal shut, and marched down the stairs without breakfast. Agnes stood by the door, holding it open with an eerie calm. "Heading out already?" she asked. "Yeah," Julia muttered. "I've seen enough." Agnes nodded, knowingly. "Safe travels, dear." Julia didn't look back. She drove fast, faster than she should have, on the winding country roads. The town disappeared in the rearview mirror. Pine trees lined both sides, the canopy above tightening like a noose. For a few glorious minutes, she believed she'd made it out, that she could escape like her mother had. Then she saw it, the sign, "Welcome to Gallows End, EST 1791. She slammed on the brakes, heart ricocheting inside her chest. No. This wasn't possible. She hadn't turned. She hadn't looped back. But the town was there again, waiting for her like a spider in the center of its web. She drove again, this time faster, in a different direction. Same result. Gallows End. She tried another road. Then another. Each time, the trees closed tighter. The air grew heavier, and the moon, even in the daylight, hovered faintly above, refusing to vanish. By the fourth loop, her hands were shaking. The gas tank dipped toward empty. She stopped the car in the middle of the road, screamed into the silence, and pounded the steering wheel. Then she cried. Long, deep sobs that came from a place far beyond fear, the kind of grief that only comes when every way out has been erased. Eventually, she walked back into town. No one asked her where she'd gone. That night, Elsie appeared at her door without knocking. She carried a white robe, simple, hand-stitched, the fabric soft as lamb's wool and soaked in the scent of lavender and ash. "It's almost time," she said gently. "I'm not doing this," Julia whispered. "I won't be part of it." "You already are." Elsie stepped inside and closed the door behind her. The offering ground doesn't ask. It chooses. And once the harvest moon rises, the land demands its due. Julia backed away. "Why me?" Elsie's face crumpled with something like pity. "Because your mother ran. Because you were born under the blood moon. Because the pact was broken, and now it needs to be sealed." Julia looked at the robe in Elsie's hands. "I don't want to die." "It's not death," Elsie said softly. "Not entirely. It's becoming. You'll be part of the land. The trees. The wind. Gallows End will thrive again because of you." Julia shook her head. "You're all insane." Elsie stepped forward and placed the robe on the bed. "No, child. We're survivors. And your salvation." She left without another word. That night, Julia sat on the floor, the journal open beside her, the robe untouched. Outside, the townspeople sang again, louder this time, triumphant. The moon swelled to fullness, bleeding orange across the sky. And beneath the floorboards, something moved, something ancient, something hungry. The moon was full when they came for her. She hadn't dressed, hadn't moved. The white robe lay untouched on the bed, but it didn't matter. Two men entered the room without knocking, one carrying a candle, the other a thick coil of rope. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their eyes were empty, glazed in the moon's reflection, faces locked in serene obedience. Julia fought. She screamed. Nails toward skin, fists slammed against bone. But the men moved like statues, slow, strong, unstoppable. Her voice was swallowed by the hymn echoing through the night. That same melody she'd heard from the tree, now sung in hundreds of voices in unison. Harmonized, inhuman, they carried her barefoot through the center square. The townspeople stood in a wide circle around the oak tree, dressed in ceremonial white. Children held lanterns. Elders clutched wooden talismans shaped like crescent moons. Agnes stood near the front, humming. Elsie watched from a distance, her expression unreadable, grief, perhaps, or regret, or both. Julia was placed in the center of the circle. The tree loomed over her, gnarled branches stretching outward like twisted arms. At its base, the 12 carved stones glowed faintly with a pale green light, each one pulsing in rhythm with the chanting. Then the earth beneath her shifted. The ground opened slowly, not cracking, not breaking, but unfolding, as if the land itself were exhaling. The air turned metallic, heavy with the scent of soil, rot, and blood. From the darkness below, Something rose. It wasn't a creature. Not exactly. It had no form, no edges, no clear beginning or end. It was shadow, vibration, memory, a mass of writhing energy that shimmered like heat above asphalt. And yet, Julia felt its presence like hands brushing her mind, searching through her thoughts, peeling back every moment of her life. She saw Michael, her brother, standing beside her grave. She saw her mother, weeping in a church that no longer existed. She saw herself unborn, wrapped in moonlight, promised of something her mother never truly escaped. The present spoke without sound. You were given. You were taken. Now you are returned. Julia tried to move, but her limbs no longer belonged to her. The air around her thickened. The robe, now draped around her shoulders, tightened like a shroud. One by one, the stones lit up, the ground pulsed, the presence opened, and Julia screamed. It was not pain, it was becoming. Her body dissolved at the edges, torn gently into threads of light and dust. She was unmade with care, the way one might disassemble a machine to study every piece. Her memories burst outward into the soil, the roots, the stones. Her voice split across the wind, her soul sown like seed beneath the tree. And through it all, the townspeople sang louder. They smiled. The ritual ended in silence. The moon, now crimson, faded to silver. Julia was gone, but not truly. Beneath the offering ground, her consciousness drifted, tethered to the earth. She felt everything, the breath of trees, the hunger of roots, the heartbeat of the land. And in the center of it all, the ancient presence whispered a promise. You will never be alone again. Morning broke gently over Gallows End. Mist coiled between the stone cottages, and the dew on the windows shimmered like tiny mirrors, each reflecting the fading shadow of the harvest moon. The town was still, peaceful, the kind of peace that follows after something's been fed. In the square, the oak tree stood unchanged, or so it seemed, but the bark was darker now, richer. The moss glowed faintly green, and tiny red blossoms had begun to bloom between its roots. No one commented on them. No one needed to. Elsie walked to the base of the tree alone, carrying a small clay bowl filled with ash. She knelt between the 12 stones, each now humming softly beneath the earth, as if resonating with the pulse of something buried and content. She placed the bowl down and whispered a prayer, not to God, but to the land itself. Your gift was accepted, she murmured. She will keep us safe. A breeze passed through the square. Leaves rustled. Somewhere a child laughed. Life, it seemed, had already moved on. But under the soil, beneath the roots, Julia listened. She was not dead, not entirely. Her form had vanished, but her essence remained, stretched in across the very ground she once stood on. She could feel the heartbeat of the town, every breath, every footstep, every lie. She understood now what her mother had feared, what Elsie had tried to warn her of. She wasn't just part of Gallows End now. She was Gallows End. And though her thoughts were scattered and her memories drifting like fog, one feeling remained anchored in her being. This wasn't salvation. It was imprisonment. And when the next harvest moon came, she knew she would be waiting,